All right. Seems hectic, but we got everything together. Here we are, February, MacAdmin Monthly. And I'm going to dive right in because we have a great person to chat with this month, Patrick Wardle. Patrick, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Stoked
Uh,
to be on the MacAdmin Monthly podcast with y'all.
yeah, it's so funny. Everyone calls it a podcast. I don't really consider it a podcast. There's no RSS feed where people can go pick this up or anything. We do stream to YouTube, but it's just a chat. It's casual.
I like
Um, So, for anyone that doesn't know who are you and what do you do?
I am Patrick Wardle. I am the founder of Objective-C, which is a nonprofit organization foundation. We create free open source Mac security tools, organize the Objective by the Sea Mac Security Conference, and most recently, just publishing my first book on analyzing Mac malware. It's pretty much everything to do with Mac security, and Mac malware is my main jam. I've drank the apple juice, as I would like to say.
Yeah, all the stuff you just hit, I have notes on to like, gotta ask him about this, gotta ask him about that. So we're gonna, I think, dive a little bit more deeply into that. But so when you say you've drank the apple juice, how did you get started with like dealing with security on Apple products? Like a lot of people shy away from that. There are a lot of people who focus on Windows and,
Yeah, that's a great question because kind of an interesting take that was almost by accident, but in retrospect, a very auspicious decision, let's just say. So around 2008 now. Wow, I'm really dating myself. I worked for the National Security Agency, the NSA, and there I was doing malicious code analysis, so analyzing malware and exploits used by nation state adversaries against US government and DoD networks. So I saw all sorts of really interesting attacks and exploit, really kind of top tier capabilities. I then transitioned to the other side of the NSA, which has an offensive cyber espionage mission. It's all classified, but in short, we were developing offensive cyber capabilities to kind of further NSA's mission. So when I left the NSA, I was still very passionate about cybersecurity, especially the defense. I saw really how adversaries were able to penetrate a lot of our very sensitive networks, which would, very problematic, obviously. But, when you leave the NSA, you have to be very careful that you don't bring any kind of classified information or things you've learned that are maybe known on the inside and publicly inadvertently expose them. So I decided that I'd focus on Mac security because that would allow me to use my same foundational skills and knowledge and understanding, of reverse engineering, malware analysis concepts without applying any of the specifics that I had learned. Because at the NSA, I was doing all Windows stuff. I mean, the malware I was looking at, the exploits we were developing at that time were all Windows based. So really saw as a way for me to use the same skills, but not step on anyone's toes, right? You don't want to upset the NSA. At the time, this was again around 2008, Macs were really just starting to become somewhat more popular, but still it was even strange at that time for me to kind of break into because I really knew nothing about Macs at the time. And also there really wasn't a lot of publicly available resources, tools, books, tutorials on that. So it was really kind of like a new frontier. So it was also kind of really exciting for me to dive in. And in retrospect, a decision that I think was, I would like to say very forward thinking, but it was really, I just didn't want to piss off the NSA.
yeah, I mean, the timing is, like you said, just like really perfect. And I think you got to ride a bit of a wave because,
Definitely.
right, like there weren't a lot of books or, podcasts or notes. Some of the people here on this call right now like have been part of the scene like for quite some time and remember sort of like the dearth of information. I mean, in some ways there's still a dearth of information, right? Like
Right.
Apple doesn't document things
No, they
quite
don't.
the level that we'd like to see in a lot of cases. um, and I'm sure everyone here remembers when Michael Bartosh came out with like that first book published by O'Reilly, and it was like the Bible of it was like the only like officially published O'Reilly title, and like everyone was so excited. And it was just like this big, thick book. Um, and then not exactly the same, path as you, but I remember Why is his name escaping me right now? Uh, oh my God, he's so nice, and I'm a terrible person for forgetting his name, but he wrote the Mac internals book. Amit
Oh,
Singh.
Jonathan Levin. Oh, and
No,
Amit
no, no,
Singh.
Amit Singh before
Yeah.
Jonathan
Oh, yeah.
Levin. And what reminded me of your path was he was like working for IBM at the time, and he was kind
That's
of just very like, well, I'm into operating systems. Let me just go check out this other operating system. And he just like dove in and wrote this,
right. Yeah.
enormous
It's a
book.
tone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tome. And in fact, the funny thing is I had a reviewer's copy of that, and it
Wow.
was split into 2 volumes. That's
Huh.
like they didn't even like the reviewer copies were just like these 2 massive volumes, and then, of course, when it shipped, it was just enormous. Um, so it really is amazing to see the growth
There
of.
it
Yeah, yeah, there it is, there it is.
Yeah, we used to call that the toe breaker because he dropped it and hit the nose.
is.
Yeah. So, like, before we get into all the important stuff, I'm gonna ask the question on everyone's mind. You are the cousin of the guy who made Wordle. That's the
I
important.
am, and I love this because now I'm no longer the most famous Wordle. I mean, I'm not saying I was to begin with, but first, whenever I'm on the phone with customer support or something, they're like, "What's your name?" And it's like Patrick Wardle, and I always have to spell that out because they're like Wordle, Wardle, Wardell, and it's arguably a difficult last name to say. So yeah, my cousin Josh, who is a software engineer, he worked at Reddit in the past, now lives in Brooklyn, and he is really interested in kind of social experiments, but in the sense of creating games. And in Reddit, he kind of designed the button, which was kind of an April Fool's thing, but again, kind of an interesting experiment to see how people interact with games and events and stuff. But yeah, the Wordle game, which now has taken the internet by storm, I love because it really resonates with a lot of things that are important to me, kind of the ethos. And for example, he created it first and foremost for his partner. She liked to play word games, so he's like, I'll write an app, and it's kind of like, what a sweet romantic gesture. And then he kind of started sharing it with family, and it really took off. And in a way, the rest is history. But I love that one, it's totally free, with no strings attached, right? There's no ads, there's no upsells. It's just really, he was like, hey, this is something I created for my partner. Now I can share with the community to bring people, joy, maybe connect us to get together in a little bit. I also like that, you can only play it once a day, right? So it's something that isn't trying to be viral, or it isn't trying to be addictive, unlike so many of the other games and that are always demanding our attention. So to me, that's really kind of one of the main things I like it. And obviously it did amazingly successful and was recently acquired by the New York Times, which again, I think is really neat because I think it illustrates a really unique path of where you can create things that you're passionate about, share them with the community with no strings attached, but then also be financially benefit or incentivized by that without these like dirty tricks of trying to get people to subscribe or collecting all the information about them. I mean, there's always the saying that if something is free, you are the product. And that is generally true, whether it be Facebook, Gmail, or something. There's always some strings attached. But I think when we're talking about indie developers, or nonprofits and those kind of things, generally there can be a free game, a free product, or something where it's really just designed for the benefit of the community. And so I like seeing stories like that, for example, with the word game Wordle, because I think I really hope it inspires other people to kind of take this path and shows that there can be a happy ending with financial benefits, which are important. But that was not, that's not the intention. And hopefully, again, it inspires people to do cool things for the community. And the first question isn't, how do I make money off this? It's like, what can I do to bring people happiness and joy, which especially in these times, I think is very admirable and something we need more of.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, agreed. Those are all great points because I think some of the things that I love about it are, that that, like you said, it's taken the internet by storm. People are sharing their results. The great thing is that he created a way for you to share your results without a
Exactly.
spoiler, like
Yeah.
super clever. Um, but I think the other thing I love about it is how many people have done a teardown on it, and you see people like, "Here's how Wordle works, and here's the optimal mathematical,"
Yeah, the analysis.
yeah, it's amazing people are, like, putting that much thought into it, but it's
Yeah,
fun. It's fun
yeah.
to see
I
to
saw
see
there was like a little Twitter spat for a while where someone was like, "It's all done client side, so you can look at the JavaScript and figure out the word." And it's like, "Oh my, the security of this sucks." And I'm like, take a step back.
Yeah.
This is a three-word
Right.
game. It's security is important when you're trying to secure something, but
Right.
in a fun game, like that's all fine. So it is interesting to see people's takes, but yeah, the celebrities tweeting about it and everything.
Yeah.
Read an article, my cousin Josh, he grew up on a sheep farm in Wales that we would spend time on as kids. And, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. And there was an article interviewed his parents and, they're sheep farmers. And so it's great because the quote that his dad, my uncle, said is like, "This isn't going to change Josh at all." And I think that is something really true that, again, because, the goal wasn't to, make money. It's like, yeah, it worked out well in the long run, but I think it'll just enable him to kind of go on to the next thing. And so I'm, again, really stoked for that. And yeah, it is a really neat connection. It's like, Wordles aren't just doing cybersecurity stuff, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's super fun. Um, yeah, I mean, on the passion side, like, I don't know about financial compensation, but, uh, there are still people who run BBSs, like literal old school BBSs that instead of dial-in, now it's Telnet in or SSH in, but, like, they're following their passion. Like, that's fun.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think is super important. I think that gives people a lot of fulfillment. It connects us. It's really easy to get sucked into the rat race where, the priority is always, or the first question is, how can we make money off that? And I understand, obviously, that's an important question, and also in the context of business, that's something you have to ask. But I think it's at least worth asking or focusing on other things, and really not at least make money the only priority. And in the Silicon Valley culture, sometimes we see that, and I think that's ultimately not the ideal approach to take in the long run. Just focusing on kind of money at all costs. So
Yeah, great point. And actually, that leads to a really nice transition that you have a bunch of tools through Objective-C that are all freely available, right?
yeah,
And
and that's really kind of my original passion. It's kind of a funny story behind that, and it really ties back to the first question: how do I really get into this? So, as I'm sure all of you are unfortunately exposed to, as soon as your friends know you do computer stuff, you're constantly asked to, "Hey, fix my printer, fix my computer," right? It just, it's like you're pigeonholed as the IT person for all eternity, for better or worse. And so I had a friend who said, "Hey, Patrick, my Mac has been hacked. There's all these pop-ups and it's running slow. Like, can you look at it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And again, I was really just getting into Mac security. And so I went over to his house, and yeah, his Mac had, the homepage had been hijacked. And when he would browse, there were pop-ups, a clear indication of adware. And I said, "Okay, cool. Let's figure out how to clean this." And I was like, on Windows, I would just download Microsoft or sysinternal's auto runs tool, look at what's persisting, and then that's usually a great place to start. So I was like, auto runs for Mac OS, and it was like 0 hits. And I was like, wait, there's not an auto runs utility, and there's nothing built into the operating system that just tells me what is automatically set to start. Because again, the majority of adware and malware will look to persist so that when the system is restarted, obviously it'll be automatically re-executed by the operating system. And so, if there's something on the system, that's a good place to look. And there just wasn't anything. So I kind of hobbled together this embarrassingly bad Python script that enumerated, I think at the time it was like launch agents, launch daemons, and login items. Ran it on his system, and sure enough, there had been some adware that it either installed itself as a login item or launch agent. I don't remember. And from that point on, once I was able to detect that, it was very easy then to disinfect his system. And that really opened my eyes to this need for security tools on Mac OS, where if we look at Windows, there were a lot of mature and free open source utilities, but there wasn't a parity on Mac OS. And so I started writing these utilities to both protect my system. I wanted to know what was persistently installed on my Mac, and help my friends. And then I figured, hey, sharing is caring. I'll make these free on the internet. And the other thing about free is it takes a lot of pressure off you. I was like, I kind of know what I'm doing, but also not really. First and foremost, I'm a security researcher. I'm not like a, software engineer. So, I'm going to write the best software I can. And if it's open source, people can audit it and look. But, if it's free and there's an issue with it, if I export the JSON incorrectly or something, it's like, well, it's free. Take what you can get. So it also took a lot of pressure off me versus when you're charging for something, you're like, okay, this crap better work well. So that was really the motivation. And then I just saw more need for security tools, again, focusing on the end user. Another example is Lulu. It's a firewall I created. I mean, there's some great firewall products for macOS, but there wasn't a free open source one. And as I did a lot of research about security threats facing macOS, I saw instances where users would not believe that basically Macs get malware. I mean, and we all know better, but you talk to the average Mac user, that's still unfortunately a common sentiment, I would say. It's getting better, and a lot also don't really, or having that mindset, aren't really willing to pay for security tools. And in the context of the end user, I saw a lot of cases where individuals would get targeted by sometimes really nasty malware. There was one case where this virus would turn on the webcam and try to spy on users. And it was actually somewhat sophisticated in the sense that it would wait till the user was not sitting in front of the computer, and then it would turn on the webcam. The indicator light would come on, but the malware author's idea was if the user wasn't in front of their computer and their computer was perhaps in their bedroom, they would be able to spy on the user in potentially intimate and compromising situations. And again, a security tool would have trivially detected that, the webcam had been accessed in an unauthorized manner, that video was being exfiltrated by an untrusted, unsigned process. And I really said, hey, look, we need to at least have an option for users to have free open source tools so that they can hopefully secure their systems or increase the security of their systems without having to pay. And again, obviously in the context of the enterprise, yeah, I have no problem companies paying for that. But for the average home user, I think there's a lot of good that can be done by creating free open source tools. So the combination of, hey, there's these tools not being made available, and me having the skills and capabilities and wanting to help users secure their systems was really the motivation. And the last thing is, it's also a really good way to understand the operating system. So when I'm writing these security tools, also often I'm poking around in the bowels, learning about Apple's new frameworks. And a lot of times, malware authors are doing the same thing as a way to circumvent them. So when I'm analyzing malware, a lot of the information I have gleaned or gained by writing security tools really helps me analyze malware. So to me, they're intimately tied together. So it's also something that has benefited a lot of my studies of Mac malware, which is something I do a lot as well. So it's this really kind of neat hobby, neat activity of writing these security tools that I've fallen into and embraced wholly.
Yeah, yeah, they're totally entwined. But as you were talking about some of these free tools, particularly some of the ones you released early on, I don't think I ever told you this or admitted this to you. And in my defense, this was before we met in person. But I was giving a talk on reverse engineering at, I think it was Mac Sysadmin, 2012, 2013.
Okay.
And we were talking about reverse engineering, and one of the examples I gave, why would you ever want to do this? Why would you ever need to know to do this? And I was like, there's this guy who's kind of recently shown up, a former NSA, and he's giving away these free tools.
Fair point.
How do you know what they do, right?
I always say, look, if I want to hack your computer, I don't have to ask for a password. I don't have to get you to download something. That's totally a joke, but yeah, no, that's fair. I always say trust but verify, and again, that's one of the reasons why now the tools are all open source, because again, that's a really valid point. We tell users to verify the sources of where we're downloading that and not inadvertently trust that. And honestly, that's a very valid concern and something I would have as well. As I mentioned, I used to work for a U.S. government intelligence agency, and now it's like, hey, download and run this. that's very valid to have that question. So yes, being able to reverse engineer is a really good skill. And then also, having tools being open source, I think counters that as well. And finally, I think aligning it with the fact that we're now a nonprofit also is helpful, because in the past people would be like, okay, I understand it's free and open source, but like, where's the angle here? It's like, this seems too good to be true. And I think, understanding that, we're an established nonprofit also really helps with that as well, which is a really good thing, because again, there's really no strings attached. These are just tools I run on my computer to protect myself, and then also share with the community. And the motivation for these tools sometimes come from interesting ways. I've talked about this a few times, but there's a simple utility I wrote called Do Not Disturb that will alert you when your MacBook is opened. And the idea for this came when I was in Russia. I was there for a conference, and I jumped on Tinder, as we do when we're in Moscow. This was in my younger, crazier days, and I matched with this beautiful Russian woman who was like, "Okay, you need to take me to this restaurant on this day at this time." And I was like, YOLO, right? And so we went there and we sat down and we're chatting. And about a few minutes in, she pulls out a business card and she's like, "I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I train Russian diplomats or Russians that travel in the legal nuances of the country that they're going to." The idea is, if you're a spy or a diplomat and you've been deployed to another country, you don't want to like run afoul of some stupid law and basically get on their radar. And so she was very upfront about what she did and why we were connecting. And I was like, this is what the Russians do. They build these relationships. But also I was like, man, my laptop back at the hotel room is probably just getting ransacked, and I wouldn't know. And granted, I was traveling with a burner laptop, so I wasn't too stressed. But I said, it'd be really cool if there was a utility that if someone opened the laptop, I would get an alert or a ping. There'd be a log message or something. And so that was really the inspiration for that. So some of the tools are just like, hey, there needs to be a free open source firewall for Mac OS. Others are like, I'm having dinner with a spy and my laptop's probably getting, just rocked. And so I would like to know about that. So some kind of interesting stories behind that as well.
So you did mention that Objective-C is now a nonprofit. And I remember seeing that announcement a few months back. It was pretty recent, relatively recent, right? So what does that mean? What does that do for you? Why do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you mentioned, it's something recent, kind of the start of this year. That's largely just because of the long and arduous process of establishing a nonprofit. Turns out the IRS really likes money. And if you're setting up a nonprofit, which obviously has tax exemptions for people that donate to it, they really want to make sure that you're, dotting all the I's, crossing the T's, and really kind of doing it for the right reasons. So, there's a few reasons we did that. I touched on one, and that first and foremost was really to kind of just officialize, I don't know if that's the right word, make official kind of what our community focus always was. So from the beginning, all of Objective-C's tools were free. The book I was writing, fully free online. The conference, free to attend, live stream. So again, it's just like all this community focused content to raise awareness, to educate users, to build a community. And people would still kind of have some doubts as to why. So aligning that with a nonprofit, I mean, in a sense, we were always had the nonprofit mentality, but now really kind of having that stamp of approval, I think provides some external validation to our mission. And for a lot of people, helps wrap their heads around, why are they doing this? I think people, as I mentioned earlier, are rightfully skeptical if something's free. They're like, okay, where's the hitch? Because normally there are strings attached, right? It's like Gmail's, scanning your email, looking for AdWords, Facebook's mining, whatever, Instagram, it's like, yeah, these things are free, but they come with a catch. So, understandably, if it's like this tool is free, this book is free, it's like, well, why? Whereas if you're like, hey, look, we're a nonprofit, we're working towards bettering the community. That's just, I think, the optics of that are a lot more understandable. The other main reason, too, is we have a lot of companies and supporters, such as Kanji, who allow us to do this. Running a conference takes a lot of time, but also costs a lot of money. I mean, you got to rent out the venue from the hotel. You got to, compensate some of the speakers, hire videographers, photographers, like it, that adds up. Same with writing tools, hosting, there's obviously costs. And so having these amazing companies support us and our vision is really the only reason why I and Objective-C is here today, and also allowing us to do, expand, launch a conference, write books, et cetera, et cetera. So now being a nonprofit, there's obviously tax incentives for that as well, for the donation, for those that are donating. So it's really this win-win where for us as Objective-C, it really doesn't change almost anything in terms of our vision and our goals. But it does kind of make everything we do a little more official. And then also there are some obvious tax advantages to people who are donating, which is great because hopefully that inspires more donations, allow us to, grow the conference, do more training, write more books, really just do what we do better without having to worry too much about the costs behind that. So, like I said, it was kind of an arduous process dealing with the IRS, but something we're super excited of, and really, as I mentioned, aligned with Objective-C. And if I did it all over again, I would just start as a nonprofit. But as I mentioned, it's a little difficult to do. You had to hire a lawyer, which costs, a decent amount of money. But again, because thanks to the support of my Patreon supporters and the companies that support Objective-C, we were able to kind of go that route. So very appreciative of that. And yeah, really, really excited about it. It'll just allow us to continue to grow and do way more awesome things, which I'm super stoked about.
Great. So everything, all of that is bundled under Objective-C, the nonprofit,
Exactly.
the conference, the books, the tools. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, in that list, you mentioned writing a book. Let's talk about that. Let's plug the book.
Yeah. So I remember this was several years ago. My friend Alex Inesco, he's kind of a very well-known security researcher. He said, Patrick, you're going to write a book sometime. And he's a prolific author, incredibly talented, one of those individuals you look up to and you're just like, whew, like almost intimidated, super nice guy, but just the knowledge and expertise. And that always like resonated with me. It was like, maybe I could write a book. But it was something that I felt I had the knowledge, but the whole process to me was a little intimidating. So the route I took, which is really interesting, and I would definitely take this for future books as well, is to kind of do it as a community effort. So I would write a chapter, and the book is, in a nutshell, how to analyze Mac malware. So the idea is, say you get a binary or an unknown file that might be suspicious. How do you analyze it, right? How do you determine if it's benign? Is it malware? If it's malware, is it known malware? Is it new malware? If it has anti-analysis logic, how do you, work through that? But yeah, basically, if you're interested in being a Mac malware analyst or interested in understanding threats facing Mac OS, it's kind of the resource for that. So I kind of had all the knowledge and pieces from, I'd write these security tools, and when a new piece of malware came out, I'd always analyze it and then see how it would match up against the tools. So I've really kind of always stayed on the cutting edge of Mac malware. So, and in that process, I've done a lot of analysis. I've done trainings on it. So I felt like I had all the information in my head. It was just getting it down into, a multiple 100-page book. So what I did was I would write each chapter, and then I'd post it online as a Google document that was readable and commenting on by anybody. And the idea was to engage the community and say, okay, here's my draft, like be gentle, but, give me your feedback, right? Like, what have I grammatically said incorrectly? Or more importantly, for, technically, what might be inaccurate? What am I missing? And that was really great because that gave me the confidence and the community support to push forward with this. I basically knew that, there were security researchers, individuals who both showed a lot of interest, but would give me feedback and support. So, that's why it really motivated me and gave me the confidence to see it all the way through. So the idea was to make it fully free online, and it currently is. And then No Starch Press, which is an incredible publisher of technical books, reached out and said, hey, we would like to publish that. And I said, awesome, on one caveat that it has to remain free online. And they were like, yeah, no problem. We've worked with other authors before. And I was like, awesome. And they said, yeah, it's great. There's people that are always going to want a hard copy. And obviously, they're going to have to pay for that because of the costs of editing and producing and publishing. No problem. But yeah, sure, no problem. You can post all the chapters online for free. We'll lay them out. We'll edit them professionally. I said stoked. So as of, what is today? Tuesday. As of Monday, so yesterday, the book has now gone to the publisher. So it's going to be out April or early May. And you can pre-order it on No Starch's site. But again, I really wanted to point out and also make it known that it will be available for free fully online. And again, this just aligns with the kind of ideas, ethos of Objective-C. Like, I put myself in the shoes of a poor college student, which was myself. And, I didn't have money to buy books. I was paying it all on textbooks, right? Which are overly priced. So, it's kind of this community resource that the community helped build. So I think it's really important that it can be free. And again, thanks to the support of the companies that support Objective-C and all the Patreon supporters, I'm able to do that and cover costs. So super excited about writing that. It was definitely a multi-year effort, and always more work than you expect. But I'm really proud of it, and I think it'll be an invaluable resource for Mac admins, students, Windows malware analysts trying to come over to the Mac space, which is important because we see Mac malware increase in terms of both its sophistication and prevalence. And so the malware authors and the bad guys and girls are really kind of stepping up their game. And so it's equally important for us to kind of swell the ranks on the other side and continue to grow Mac malware analysts, Mac admins who have understandings of threats to kind of counter that. And I really hope that this book provides knowledge and information and teaches people or increases their knowledge in this arena.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see malware that's cross-platform in some way, right? Like that's fascinating. So the idea of giving Windows researchers sort of a peek into like how to get started on the Mac is really interesting.
And that was important to me because that's exactly the path I took. And like, this is the book I wish was available at the time, because I mean, in retrospect, it was good that I had to kind of figure that all out myself, but it would have been really nice if there was a book that gave me the foundations, the basics, and really pointed me in the right direction. So that is really, really the goal, because as you mentioned, cross-platform malware, we're seeing a ton of that. I kind of look at the new Mac malware for each year, and I believe it was last year or maybe 2020. It's all kind of blurring together, right? Half of the new malware samples for that year had been ported over from other platforms, Windows and Linux. So that to me is really unsurprising, right? Mac is becoming incredibly popular, especially in the context of the enterprise. And you have malware authors who have malicious creations that work on Windows and Linux that talk to, say, some backend command and control server. Well, if they can port that over to Mac, and it can speak the same protocol, and so it can still communicate and be compatible with their command and control server. And now immediately they have a whole new set of targets, all these Mac systems that then they can now infect. So, it's really a no-brainer. It's like an app developer writing a Windows app and then porting it to Mac OS. It's, malware is essentially just software with malicious intent. So again, really unsurprising, but also a trend we need to be aware of. And there are a lot of Mac-specific nuances, Mac-specific tools where when you analyze even cross-platform malware on Mac OS. So I really thought it was important to also have a resource that would allow people with basic Mac malware, basic Windows or Linux malware analysis capabilities, kind of teach them, okay, yeah, bring all that. That's really good to help. And here's kind of the Mac-specific stuff you need to know on that, because as you mentioned, cross-platform malware is definitely on the uptick.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how much of that cross-platform work is due to Python, rather than, so we'll see with Python disappearing from Mac OS. We'll see what that's, because it would be a lot of work to ship your own Python just for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, from a an Apple corporate point of view, I understand why they do that, right? It's I don't think you can sign scripts really. So from a security point of view, they're removing it. I personally, yeah, it's a complicated topic. I mean, it seems in some ways very detrimental to Mac admins, developers. The fact that this scripting capability isn't there, I think they're trying to go down the path of really locking down macOS as much as possible and controlling everything, kind of like they do on the iPhone. And I think removing Python and other script-based languages is a step in that direction. I mean, they're also kind of stepping back from AppleScript a little bit and those kind of things. So, it's a little unfortunate because it feels like the platform is becoming less and less open, which is something that I disagree with. But yeah, I mean, there are some silver linings. We see a lot of malware that's written in Python or abuses Python. And, that does cause problems. Even, for example, my security tools, Lulu, the firewall, has a rule that you can check that says allow Apple processes, because you obviously want to allow Apple software updaters to connect to the internet without a firewall or the user clicking block inadvertently. But I had to create a specific kind of override list that says, okay, if Python is connecting out, yes, that's an Apple signed binary, but like, what is it executing, right? This is maybe malware. So, from a security point of view, I fully understand how Python can make things harder, but still to just say like, we're removing it completely, like, that's a decision wrought with complexities, let's just say.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it, because I'm really not sure what drove the decision entirely. Like, I could almost imagine that they don't want to maintain it. It's another like third party thing that they don't want on the system, but it also gives them an opportunity to say to people like, oh, you want to automate stuff, go learn Swift, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's helping drive people towards Swift as much as anything else. So
sure, that's a good point.
I
The
mean,
thing that just bothers me, it seems very selfish on Apple's point of view, which again, I get. Apple does what Apple wants, and not to knock
yeah,
them. I mean, again, I put myself in their shoes. Yeah, of course they want people to use Swift, but it's like, if you look at Mac's underpinnings, right? It's got a lot of BSD stuff. It's kind of got this of being this more Unixy, Linuxy based system, and which I think all of us appreciate and like that we can just pop in, write some Python, and yeah, we'll still be able to download and install it. But like, it really seems to be, pulling at the soul of what macOS really is. And again, it's up to
it is or was.
so they can do what they want, but
Yeah, pulling at the soul of what macOS is or was.
or was, right? And maybe
We don't, right? We don't.
upset about change, but at the same time, it's kind of like, oh, come on, who doesn't
Well, I
want?
mean, that was part of the beauty of macOS at one point. Like, I think, I've and most people on this call have been around long enough to come from the classic days of just like the closed, Mac system 7, 8, 9. And then there were all these promises and like, sort of back in the days of like, oh, Apple is going to go out of business. But,
Yeah,
like, oh, they're going to buy BOS. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And if they never came out with Mac OS 10 or something close to it, yeah, I'd probably be on a FreeBSD laptop or something like that nowadays. But Apple did deliver, and they came out with this operating system that was still Macintosh and ran all this cool software, and I could pop open a terminal, and I could,
exactly. Best
right,
of both
like,
worlds.
yeah. So, and you probably remember the advertising back in those days, like they had the big Unix stamp, right? Like, we are Unix, right? Like that big sort of like metal looking Unix, like riveted ad. And yeah, that has definitely changed quite a bit. Partially, like you said, due to security. Um, but yeah, we'll see how much more lockdown that gets in the future. I mean, like, terminal's not going away. So like, I know they've said Bash is deprecated, but you can do a ton of stuff in Bash, right? Including opening up network sockets and all these things. So like, that's another tough one to kind of defend against. And I see someone just drop that in the comments that says ZSH will still be there though, and presumably will still run scripts. So yeah, all those shells, like even if they get rid of Python, like there are still these little ways to kind of cut yourself.
Yeah.
There's
honestly,
always going to be Perl.
Yeah, always Perl.
Yeah.
And a lot of there's the JavaScript. A lot of the packages that Apple ships for the longest time had their post installs were written in JavaScript.
Yep.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it's interesting
yeah.
to see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and also like getting rid of Python. It's Python 2.7 they're getting rid of, which has been so long dead
Yeah, that's
already.
probably.
So the issue was that they never updated and started pushing out Python
Yeah.
3.
So yeah. I will
Yeah,
say some of
it's
the
good.
tools were in Python, and I quickly went over to native executables because users would be like, "This doesn't work," and there's they had installed Homebrew and other Python, and so from a distribution point of view, I understand as well. So, but yeah, I really hope Apple continues not to close the platform down too much. Already creating free open source software is challenging because now you need certain entitlements and certificates to do that. So, for example, Lulu the firewall I write, yes, the source code is all there, but if the user wants to download and make their own build, they either have to turn off system integrity protection and like undermine the security of their system, or they have to beg Apple for their own signing certificates with entitlements, for example, to leverage the endpoint security framework. So, it's really, as the platform becomes more closed and closed, there's actually downsides that impact the user. And, I'm not going to go on a tangent too much about this, but, think about our iPhones. Like, how do you see what processes are running? You don't. So, if
yeah.
letter agency has an iMessage exploit, which they all do, and whack your phone and install an implant, on Mac, you could probably do a process list and be like, okay, there's something that's not signed by Apple running as root, like big red flag. Really not easy to do that on iOS. So it's really interesting to think also that as a platform becomes more and more closed, for advanced adversaries, that is actually a benefit because they'll still be able to get in and they will be able to utilize the lack of visibility as a means to protect their implants and their persistent capability once they're on the system. So I don't think that's something Apple always thinks about. And I don't also know the solution, right? The solution is not to like make iOS more wildly open, then you end up with like Android or something. But it's just an interesting paradox of closed systems actually benefiting attackers.
Yeah, you bring up a few things there that I want to touch on. One is just like mentioning Android. I think like Google's got their security down, right? Like I think Android is quite secure.
Yeah.
Secure as iOS. I think the complaint about Google is more around privacy and like what.
Yeah. And the app stores.
But from a security perspective, like, yeah, Android is pretty rock solid. The other thing that you touched on was playing around with system extensions, and I think that is one of the most frustrating things to me. That like, there's no easy way just to like, hey, I'm going to experiment with this. I don't want to distribute it. I don't want to do anything else, right? I just want like, I don't want to turn off SIP on my machine, but I just want to like write a test thing and test it out. And that to me is really frustrating. That like there is no quick, easy feedback loop there. I mean, fire up a VM, disable it, do it all in a VM. I don't know, but
but developing a VM sucks.
yeah.
I struggle with this too, and I'm just like, and it's just there's other examples of that as well. For example, malware that runs on Apple Silicon, I kind of refer to as M1 malware. It's really just has been compiled to run on that, right? Like there's no good way to do virtualization of that. So like I literally had to go buy a refurbished MacBook Air just to analyze this new malware. And it's kind of like, it's just frustrating that some of Apple's security decisions are definitely impacting, as you mentioned, the development of security tools and or complicating things like malware analysis. And like the adversaries, the bad actors, like they're not really struggling, right? They're still coming out with notarization bypasses and ways to do that. And maybe it's a little more difficult than it used to be, but it's interesting sometimes as Apple raises the security of a platform, the bad adversaries simply evolve pretty quickly because they're very financially motivated and have a lot of skilled capabilities. And, us as third-party developers or Mac admins are sometimes kind of like stuck in this purgatory or limbo where, hey, the scripts we want to run and the things we want to do to help secure the systems are now more difficult to do. And it's like, it's impacting us more negatively than anyone else. So it's, again, this conundrum. I don't know the solution, But I think something Apple might not think that fully through, or don't care. Who knows? I mean, they're, you know, a $3 trillion company. They're doing something right from their point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
We still like all their devices.
Yeah, we do. You know, Apple, I'm very fond of a lot of what they do, but sometimes I feel like, which side are we on, right? Or we kind of get stuck in the middle, I would say.
Yeah. And then the other thing you touched on there, which kind of affected me personally recently, was, you know, being able to inspect your iOS device. And
Sure.
it's so difficult. And, you know, sort of being on the security side myself, you know, I run with a certain level of paranoia. Uh,
Healthful, though.
you know, but I also like the idea of longevity in technology and not having to always chase down the latest thing. So my phone for the longest times, iPhone 10. Like I got it, Face ID, it came out, oh cool. And I've just
Yeah.
hung on to that for forever. And it's been great. There's nothing I can't do on the phone. I don't care about the camera upgrades because
Yeah.
I have a camera,
Definitely.
an actual camera that I like. And then I guess at this point, it's maybe 2 months ago. You know, when you swipe down, you get that search bar, and
Yeah.
there are also Siri recommendations
Okay.
that show you like what it thinks you might want to run. The
Yeah.
other thing it will always show in that list is something you've just installed. So I launch everything that way. Just swipe down, type what I want, go.
Sure.
So I swipe down, and there's something in that list that I've never seen before, and I do not remember downloading it. And I went, "What the hell is that?" Right? So I
Was it a
go, I'm like,
U2 album?
"No." So I was like, "Oh, maybe this is maybe I did download it and I forgot."
Strange.
So I go to the App Store, and it's still, the badge is still like get. You know, it's
Wow.
not like redown. It doesn't show like re-download or
Yeah.
open.
Yeah. Open or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, that's not good. So to make a long story short, I wound up contacting a bunch of people that I know at Apple on the security side and say, "Here's what I'm seeing. How
Yeah.
can I figure out?" And they're like, "Oh, run this thing, it'll dump the logs and this." And like after a bunch of back and forth, even the people I know at Apple were like, "Yeah, I don't know." So I'm like, "Well, this thing's going in the incinerator, right? Done."
Yeah.
I went out like that day. I was like,
How to get you to upgrade? They're like, you need an iPhone 13.
yeah, I was like, "Well, that's what I did." I went to the Apple Store that day, bought an iPhone 13. I was like, "Well,
So their plan worked.
I I guess," but it was like
Yeah.
back to the point, it was just like no one could explain what happened.
So frustrating. Yeah.
Right now, maybe there is someone. It's probably innocuous, and I'm not saying that I was
Right.
particularly targeted or who knows what happened, but I couldn't explain it. So done. That's it. Right? Like just done. So there's probably someone who works for the App Store or something
Yeah.
like, yeah, dope, you've downloaded this and you forgot, or some, who knows, right? But
Family, iCloud, iTunes sharing or something, or yeah.
some people suggested that, and I looked, but I could not find it. And like I said, the strangest thing to me was going to the App Store and
Yeah,
still
that's
seeing
really
like
odd. That's a
get, it wasn't
good approach. But
open, so I was like, no idea. Um, just before we get too far away, you were talking about the book, and I was going to say that uh, that was such an interesting approach to allow comments on the doc and sort of get this crowdsourced, um, you know, tech editing and
yeah,
comment
exactly.
editing,
Yeah.
basically, because I'm sure as Eric can attest to, like a good editor when you're writing just makes all the difference.
All the
That,
difference.
you know, you're writing and for some reason your brain just can't see your own mistakes, and you read it 5
Yeah.
times and your brain just skips over it.
Yeah,
And
it's the worst. It's so
right,
frustrating.
someone else looks at it and immediately is like, "This is misspelled, but this is
Yeah,
right.
it sounds like
Did
a
you really
frustrating.
mean this? That can't be right." And like, so did you feel that was a successful sort of like method of getting some editing to this?
I would say yes and no. Yes, predominantly, especially from a technical point of view, I had really good input. Like, hey, here's another case study.
Huh.
This is a little confusing. You know, you said this, but then what about this malware? And I was like, oh, that's really, really great. It was funny though, because when I started working with No Starch and they brought in like professional, book editors, like they still just like redline everything and like pointed out some really good points. So I would say the combination is both. Like I cringe thinking of going to No Starch with just a draft I had written that didn't have the community edits. And again, from a technical point of view, is super solid. But at the same time, I would recommend, just like you said, always having a professional editor, especially if you're going to publish that. Because, I mean, honestly, we started the editing process last year and it took almost a year. I mean, it was also because the editing process isn't always the most fun. So I'm not always the most motivated to, going through that, especially if there's like some new Mac malware that's shiny and calling my name. But yeah, it was eye-opening to see both sides, how great the community involvement was and the recommendations and the feedback from them, but then also to get a professional. And No Starch is great because they have like book editors, layout editors, technical editors, like grammar. Like, I mean, it's just a whole myriad of very niche, very talented professionals, which is really great, because when you get a hard copy book, like it's really the worst if you open it. It's just like doesn't feel polished. And so I think they do a really good job. And again, I'm super appreciative to them for putting so much time and effort, and then also still allowing me to publish all the chapters, the professionally edited chapters, online on free. And so those will probably be posted once the book is published in late April or early May. But yeah, if I'm actually starting on a new book. I'm not gonna give all the details yet, because I'd like to get into it a little bit first to make sure it's like happening, similar topic. But I'm definitely going to go the same route of, again, the community involvement, because I really just felt it so invaluable. And then it also gets people invested in it, which is a good thing. And it also really gives me kind of this support. Like you feel like there's people behind you who are wanting you to exceed and helping you to exceed or succeed. And also that really pushes me. So it kind of, even if it's all psychological, kind of takes the burden off my shoulders, and it feels really good when you're creating content and there's people kind of supporting and cheering you on. So kind of interesting approach, and for me, it worked really well, and I would definitely recommend it, for others as well.
Yeah, super cool to hear that. So I know we're coming up on an hour. Everyone probably was ready to wrap up a little bit, but one of the things we always close with is conferences, and perfect topic, because I wanted to get to your conference. You run a conference. Tell us a little bit about Objective by the Sea for this year.
So Objective by the Sea is a Mac security conference. Basically, at the time, and maybe even still now, we said, look, there isn't a conference that's dedicated specifically to Mac security conferences. There's a lot of amazing MacAdmin conferences. There's amazing developer conferences. But I thought about it. Like, I would go to a Black Hat, RSA, DEF CON, and there'd always be a few talks I was really interested in. But a lot of talks were just outside my area of expertise, or just not topics I was really interested in. Which is fine, but I said, look, if we have a conference that focuses specifically on this topic, we're going to attract a really passionate community of that, and every talk that's given is likely going to be of interest. And I always remember, I think it was the first conference, one of the speakers gave their talk, and the first one was in Maui at this really nice resort. And I was like, thank you for the talk. Like, feel free to go enjoy the pool now, have a Mai Tai. And they're like, no, I'm staying the rest of the afternoon, because every single talk I'm super interested in. And it's rare to find that at a conference. And I think you find that when you can provide a single track conference that the topics are all kind of very, very similar. So in a way, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was a little bit of, again, this like, I think we can do this, but I don't have any idea what I'm doing. And so my coworker Andrea, who organizes the Echo Party security conference in Argentina, said, hey, like, let's collab. Let's do this together. And that's been great, because she has all the expertise and understanding of how to organize that. And it allows me to focus kind of on the technical stuff, and reach out to speakers that I have the relationships with, and build this really niche conference. So yeah, it's something we're super passionate about. We're up to version 5.0. It's going to be back in Europe probably in September or October. We always do one in the US in Hawaii, and then somewhere internationally in Europe, because there's a huge Mac fan base, let's just say there. I mean, they're very privacy focused. Macs are huge in Europe, understandably. So kind of like do it over there. And so yeah, looking for Q3 end of the year. And again, just sticking to our proven approach, which is keep it small. We usually have around 100 150 people. The attendees always say that's really good because you kind of get this intimate experience. The speakers are all super approachable, and it's really just gives this community vibe, which I just thrive on and love. I mean, it's a lot of work organizing a conference, but when you get to meet people you've seen, just online, and you get to spend time chatting with them, and just standing back and watching that all happen is just indescribably amazing. Yeah, and so that's the plan. We're lucky enough to attract like the world's top Mac security researchers. We also have some iOS talks. We will always work with local charities to raise money to support kind of the local community. And again, it's really just a community-focused event to bring people together and provide, information and knowledge to raise our, our knowledge and our wisdom to, kind of take on the bad actors.
Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you're targeting September-ish this year in person.
Yes, definitely. We were actually lucky enough to do it in person last September here, kind of between the Delta and the Omicron.
That has been that has
Um,
been a constant topic for me here. That
yeah.
as all of these conferences have, very wisely sort of like gone virtual,
Yes.
you
Yes.
were like Objective by the Sea in Maui was like the last event.
Yeah.
Like people
March
were like
20.
like if this was an earthquake movie, like the plane would be taking off as the ground was
Yep.
crumbling
Yeah.
below it. Like you just made it just before the pandemic really kind of shut everything down.
Yeah.
And then
There was
sort
like
of like
0
in that
cases on
little
Maui at the time.
lull,
Yep.
you had another event in person. Like you're the only one who seems to be getting away with this.
Huh, what do you say? No, no, no. I feel, I take it a positive sign from the universe. But yeah, we got
Great.
really lucky. The last one we did, we were pretty strict about requiring full vaccination for everyone, social distancing. We did a lot of outdoor activities, and it was great because I was a little worried that there's going to be some pushback, but really, I mean, all the attendees were amazing. I mean, they really understood that in order to do this safely for everyone, there are requirements that have to be respected. And I was definitely a little stressed about that. What if someone shows up? I'm like, I don't want to mask. You hear all the horror stories. But luckily, there was none of that. And I think that speaks to both our community and the attendees at the conference, who really knew that, like, hey, like this is something these are things we have to take into account for the safety of everyone. And yeah, it really went off without a hitch, and we felt so amazing to do that. So yeah, really looking forward to the one in September or October. Hope to see you all there in person. If not, we also freely live stream, post everything online. And again, because of the amazing support of our friends of Objective-C, we can hire professionals to live stream it and stuff like that. The first version of the conference, like I'm trying to do this with like a little handheld thing, and it just looks like crap. So it's nice to grow up a little bit, and with this financial support, be able to disseminate the information a little more professionally, which I think is a great service to the community. So again, just so appreciative to these companies that really align with our vision and really stand behind us and allow us to, I think, serve the community in ever continually better ways.
And it's awesome that you're using local resources, local professionals to do that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, that's something we really strive. I mean, community in what we do is super important. So, when we do it here on Maui, we partner with local charities, local businesses, and even in Europe, we try to do the same thing, because it's an opportunity for us to give back, not just to the technical community, but to the local community as well. If there's a critique of tech, it's sometimes we're a little decoupled from maybe the everyday rest of the community. And so any way where we can interact with them and, provide economic benefit back into the local community is something that both seems like just the right thing to do, but also builds a better sense of community as well. So in my opinion, it's really a win-win situation.
Awesome. Well, this was wonderful and wide ranging, and thank you for joining us. I hope, this educates some people who might not have heard of you before to go buy a book or attend your conference or speak at it or
Yes.
uh, download some tools or whatever it is, because it's pretty amazing like how wide ranging Objective C is. And I'm definitely looking forward to the book myself. Uh, and now very interested in what the next book will be.
Yeah, I'm planning to, in the next few months, almost done with the second chapter. So, once I have a 3 or 4, I'll start posting them online. Again, same process, get the community involvement. But yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's very complementary to the first book I wrote, and that's the plan. And kind of the idea was always kind of have a book series to provide kind of the missing manuals, let's just say. So, really excited about it. Too. And
Excellent.
also, thank you so much for hosting me, allowing me to talk nerdy for an hour. Obviously, I'm very passionate about all these topics. So, having a platform to be able to share what we're doing is invaluable because, again, the goal is really to disseminate this information and, inspire new people to bring them into this field because, we need all the help we can get. And these threats are just getting more and more sophisticated. So again, you having me on here is incredibly helpful and really thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Hopefully, I'll be chatting with you in person at some point soon,
Yes,
instead
that
of
would be the best, the dream.
virtually. But yeah, it's great that you want to inspire people to do this, and I think there has been maybe maybe it's not a trend quite yet, but we have seen more and more like longtime Mac admins kind of hopping into the security space and taking on full security roles. So
It's so
that
needed. Yeah,
it's a great thing to have that domain knowledge and be
exactly.
in the security space. And like you said, particularly as Macs in enterprises is a
Oh,
growing segment,
definitely.
it's always tough for that Windows admin to have a bunch of Macs like, yeah,
Yeah. What do they do? Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point because I think it's a great kind of career shift. I mean, it's amazing for job security. And I think it's imperative for the enterprises to realize that they really need individuals with those talents and also third party security tools to really kind of button up some of the gaps that Apple still leaves. And so I think providing education or inspiring people to kind of trend in that direction is really a win-win from them as individuals, but also for the enterprises that they work for and for the community as a whole.
yep. All right. Thank you again so very much, and we'll be keeping an eye on everything you do. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you again. It's a pleasure to be on.